Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Courtney Lovely Evans, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Athletics at Palm Beach Atlantic University. I've had the opportunity to participate in several NCAA leadership development programs that I believe prepared me for the chair, the Dr. Charles Whitcomb Leadership Institute, and Achieving Communication Success. Both of those programs allowed me to meet several thought leaders in our industry, as well as me working on developing my personal leadership philosophy. As a leader, it's important for you to communicate your expectations to your staff. At Palm Beach Atlantic University, we are developing Christian game changers, and it is our desire to be the standard in Division II.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. I am joined by Michelle Morgan. Michelle is the Senior Director of Athletics at John Carroll University. Greetings, Michelle. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Michelle, you are, let's look at these credentials. You've been at John Carroll for, you're going in your fifth year, I think. Correct. It is, right? Going to your fifth year. You've been in sports for over 20 years, right?
Just about yeah.
Over 20 years. You've been in college athletics for 12 of those years.
Correct.
And prior to, spent some time in professional sports, which I think is an excellent background with excellent history. Worked at University of St. Thomas, where my good friend Glenn Caruso is the head football coach. So I think you're coming out of a great program there at St. Thomas. So
yeah, my alma mater too, actually. So.
Okay, excellent, right. So I'm glad to have you on. You also serve this year as the chair of the D3 Management Council, right?
I do.
And I guess being on that council is a 4-year appointment, and this year you're the chair. One thing I know about Division III people is that Division III people are Division III people. 100% D3 for the rest of my life, and I love it, right? Which is interesting. I want to get some insight on the Management Council, on your appointment there. What did you expect coming into it, and now being the chair of the Management Council? Tell us about the outcomes you guys have accomplished and want to accomplish moving forward with Division III leadership.
I think, my experience on the Management Council, this is my fourth year. I have the opportunity to serve as the chair this year, but if we look at our industry and our world over the last 4 years, it's been anything but normal. Right. And so I probably have a unique experience on the governance structures and the subcommittees right now. So last year I had the opportunity to serve as vice chair. This year I was appointed to chair. I'm about halfway through that final year of my term. And it's been really interesting with a new constitution, with a transition, really going through our membership model and looking at Division III and determining what really are our priorities, what can we tackle first. And we look at structures in a division that's the largest division of all three amongst the NCAA schools, and it's the most diverse, arguably. So it's a challenge, right, to try to paint broad brushstrokes to figure out what might work best for everybody and prioritize, even though at times we have competing priorities based on the makeup of each of our institutions.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. D3, you mentioned diverse. There are a lot more women leading programs in Division III, which I think is an excellent thing. Are there a few key points that coming into this ever-evolving landscape of college athletics that are points of pride for how Division III is leading itself in terms of college athletics?
That's a great question, and I think that we don't pause enough to reflect on it,
which is important
right?
To
do. As Division III leaders on campuses, we tend to be kind of the jack of all trades and not, cubbyholed into a particular niche, one or the other, because like any administrator at any level, right, you're solving problems that the public don't necessarily know exist, right? That means you're doing a good job. But with that said, just the bandwidth of resource and structure requires us to know a lot about a few more different things at times, right? And that global scale. I think as we look at new opportunities with a new constitution, Division III is a lot of great opportunities in how we might focus on allocation of resources, championship access, makeup and what our committees look like and where we're pulling from. Because we are so large, we want to get every voice at the table, but you need to delicately balance that with productivity and numbers. So it isn't just adding people when then you can't be productive and get work done.
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? In terms of you represent the entirety of Division Three, and you want to make sure people have their voice heard, but every voice has their own concerns, their own priorities, their own level of resources, their own things, passions that they care about. How do you balance that? How do you make sure you don't necessarily want to do what's best for all, for the most, because the people who aren't getting what's best may be hurt by that, but you want to try your best to make sure everybody has some semblance of feeling like their input is heard in the direction that's made. So tell us about that aspect of it.
I related a lot to, obviously a service model, right? And what may be best for my institution and my student athletes and my conference, I have to take a step back and say, okay, how might this affect other people? And building those relationships and having a lot of conversations entrenched, across the country with how might this area of the country or that conference see something differently, or what parameters a private institution might have that's different than a public institution, and their lens of approach and thinking through things. So it's really great to lean on colleagues to have conversations to say, how are you going to implement this? Or what do you think about this? Why might you vote that way? What are you tracking on? And that's been really helpful. But that's the time aspect of things, because, we do have full-time jobs on campuses and serving. I have 23 sports and about 700 student athletes as my full-time job and my priority. But with that said, the off hours and, the nights and weekends and things like that, where it's opportunities like this to be at NACTA and see people in person and have hallway conversations and track on things that might be coming up in the pipeline is a really great opportunity.
Which is important. Do you have to, those nights and weekends, are you like, well, I guess this would be a few years ago, but there used to be these big notebooks full of just information that you had to read through, almost like a law class, read 700 pages before class tomorrow.
It's still there,
oh,
still
really?
Pretty dense.
Yeah.
I have an MBA, I don't have a JD, but
Right.
I feel like I could have one. It's like going to grad school to be an administrator in policy.
That's interesting. I just wonder how you consume that much information. You just get it done, right? I guess that's what you train your mind to
Thankfully,
do.
I think the silver lining is serving as chair. Mm-hmm. I have about 7 or 8 other subcommittees.
Oh, really?
So some of that is repeated, and NSA staff is very helpful to say, I forgot this. Can you please help me? Because that happens. Yeah. But, thematically, it's in bigger scope of things. It's fairly easy to keep things on track. But I'm forgetful sometimes, and you got to go back to notes. And
I've always worried about if I get in a position, like, I don't know what am I going to do? Every time I start reading, I get to the 22nd page and I'm falling asleep. And what did I read on page 10? You know what I mean? So
new committee members, I think, are quite shocked about. We tell them, don't start reading this on your flight down to India or wherever you're going. So.
You got to read ahead of time. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thinking about your tenure at John Carroll University, you get to a position of leadership, and that position of leadership is a makeup of all the various chapters of your career prior to, right? And John Carroll was successful before you got there, right? Mm-hmm. And continues to be successful as you have to maintain it, right? So
right.
Don't mess things up, Michelle, like we're moving forward.
Right.
But you also want to be able to make things successful in a progressive, creative, entrepreneurial way. So talk to me a little bit about that, about getting to a place that has had success, right? And you want to make sure that the success continues and be better than wherever we were in the past. Talk about that part in terms of coming to leadership and how your past and the things you've done ties into that aspect of leadership.
I came to John Carroll in the summer of 2018, and I walked into a place that had a really good bone structure, and that was successful in some metrics, right? There was opportunity to grow, and, success is hard to sustain, right? It takes, purposeful work and due diligence and commitment, not only of time and resource and people, right? But the buy-in and the culture and the climate that's created as well. And I think that we have a really great group of people that are committed to our student athletes. Academically, we have a good product. And so all of those things help, right? But it's the perfect recipe of a little bit of luck and preparedness and everything else, right? That's sport and life. I think that I've come in and tried to build on that success, and how might we level up and plan more strategically for the future, right? We have the support of our president and the board of directors, which certainly helps. We're in a really competitive conference in the Ohio Athletic Association, but it's something that is purposeful every day, right? And it's understanding what our goals and objectives are, and striding for those and talking about them, right? And my background coming from professional sports before I was at St. Thomas, really I think prepared me. St. Thomas prepared me because, they were very good at a lot of different things. And the AD that I worked under had been there at the institution in different capacities for over 50 years. And he let me learn by failing at times, but he also let me learn by trying things that were not common in Division III, right? When we put a football game at Target Field where the Minnesota Twins play against St. John's, and had over 37,000 people at a D3 football game at the time. And, in 2017, that was not the norm, right? And so trying unique things that might stick, right? That isn't an every year thing. But my lens of coming in from pro sports is how might we model and scale things that are working at different levels, so it still can be a wow factor and an impact, and really change the lives of that student athlete experience on a Division III scale.
Yeah. Was there an aspect of come in and people feel like we're winning? Why do we need to change things when you get into a place that's been successful for a while?
I think it depends on the program. It depends who you ask, right? I think that can be a mixed bag, whoever you decide to ask. I think there was opportunity, the longstanding success, especially on our men's side, in winning, the all-conference trophy pretty consecutively. Opportunities on our women's sports side to continue to grow. As a female former student athlete, right? Like I could take from that lens and that lived experience to say, right, the evolution of women's sport or the culture of program. And how might we be able to work through some of those things that are off the field and off the court, right? And that's an evolution that's still happening and taking time, but it's being purposeful with the resources and the people that you put in front of our student athletes to lead the programs and create that culture and that buy-in. But it's also, working to create an environment where our coaches lean on each other and they learn from each other. Right? As an administrator, if you tell them, hey, this is what we want you to do and this is the recipe in the playbook, it's not going to be as successful. Right. We see that same thing with student athletes.
Yeah. Do you have programs in place to help with staff development, professional development, and personal development for them? Yeah.
I sit in the seat I sit in because of professional development and resources and mentors and people that have poured into me. So I'm a big believer in that. And, if we can find ways to do that. We've also, thankfully, through an alum, through a generous gift, we've created a new role. Just hired a former student athlete, Michael Hollins, is class of 2017. He was a football student athlete for us. He's coming back and starting this fall as an assistant athletic director and going to work on leadership development. So that opportunity was funded by a football alum, Nick Casario, who's the GM of the Houston Texans. And Nick, in all of his time in the NFL has seen, in the NFL, the player development folks that pour into young people and create that team culture outside of, the locker room. And this is our goal and hopes to try to model something like that, an alum has helped to afford us the opportunity.
Will this be for student athletes and staff, or primarily student athletes?
Primarily student athletes, but I think that it's a good building bridge, right, across the way that, I think so many times our coaches look to say, we want to attend our, coaching convention, and those things are still important, right? But sometimes we neglect as professionals to look at who is in our backyard, whether it be at our institution, whether it be in our community, right? Or cross-pollinate, so to speak, not just in our sport, right? I think administrators do a good job of that, but it's also our job as administrators to introduce that concept and remind our coaches, right, that you don't always have to get on a plane. You don't always have to be, confined to your sport to find somebody that may give you that nugget of wisdom that, you didn't know you needed to ignite, the next chapter of your program.
Exactly. On that topic of professional development, I believe you went through one of the NCAA leadership development programs. Which program was it exactly?
I did. I participated in the Pathway program in 2016-17.
Oh, yeah? Tell me a little bit about your experience there, and is that helping you now, or how has that helped you in terms
Absolutely.
of your...
It was like going to grad school to be an athletic director. I don't think I would sit in the chair that I sit in today if it wasn't for that opportunity. And I go back and look at notes and assignments and reading materials often. I have a colleague, our associate athletic director is in the program now, so she was fortunate to be accepted and just started, and it's so exciting. It's like a proud mama moment, right? To know that one of our own is going through that transformative experience too, because I know it's changed my life.
Yeah, which is excellent. One thing I wonder from athletics directors, I mean, you're leading an organization with however many staff, and you mentioned earlier 700 student athletes, and you want everybody to be a leader, right? You think about on the team level, right? You have these bunch of personalities, egos, and whoever thinks they should be, especially in football, right? Whoever thinks they should be doing what they think they should, where they should be, and when they should be playing, and you have to get everybody thinking from one sole purpose, leading in one direction for the success of the team, right? This is why what I end up loving about the football coaching profession and the game of football. So you need to think about doing it on a grander scale with the whole athletics department, right? So I just talked about the football coach, but then you also got basketball, volleyball, and all the other sports you may have. 700 student athletes, and you also got the staff. To me, it's an amazing skill to be able to try your best to get everybody operating from the same playbook in terms of the culture that you have within the department and in terms of where you want people to go. I wonder about, pro sports to me looks like it's bottom line focused, money, dollars, right? But in college athletics, you have that theme, right? The success of the student athletes. So I wonder about that aspect, the challenges of leading an organization that is that significant in terms of people, where leadership is the running theme throughout the organization. Like, what are some of the challenges you've seen in terms of being in that role?
So you alluded to this a little bit in that statement and question too, in the bandwidth of people, right? I'm on a faith-based campus, right? And so part of our Jesuit mission and model is developing the whole person, and a Division III philosophy that, our student athletes are truly students first. So they might miss practice a day or two during the week because of when a lab might happen, and so that model is much different than the days when I was in the pro sports model. And with that said, I think that I try to lead from a place of, I'm here to serve others, right? And pour into others. But I often remind all of our coaches, whether it be the head coach all the way down, but that head coach I really look at as being the CEO of their program, right? So there has to be some trust in those leaders to articulate the goals and visions and what we're trying to do and hold that accountability there and their transparency the best that we can be. But it's consistency too. Right? So that although the sport might be different in the program, right? A student athlete in the fall is going to understand that a student athlete in the spring is going to have the same understanding of what the goals and objectives and what the accountability factors look like within the athletic department, right? And institutionally, and who and what they represent outside of the sport that they play in our community and on our campus. And so, it's consistency and messaging, right? But it's also that accountability factor that is, having tough conversations. Over the years, I've had some really tough conversations with the athletes, but I'll tell them, look, I want you to challenge me because that's how we're going to get better, right? But it's going to be done in a respectful manner, right? You don't have to necessarily agree with a decision or might not like a decision, but let's talk about it, right? Because then we're not putting false narratives out there and, we're not creating drama. We're getting to the point. And I've learned that a lot in the pro sports model of, look, like, this is the way it is, and this is why, right? Versus, somebody filling in their own blanks, and that leads us to a different scenario.
This is why it is important nowadays, right?
Exactly.
Right? Because back in the days, it was just like, this is the way it is, period.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, I'll ask this last question, then we'll wrap. Trust in leadership, transparency, consistent communication, consistency in that trust and leadership. I tried to, based on what you just said, try to give a brief summary of what your leadership philosophy is. But instead of me butchering it, can you tell us as we wrap up, what exactly is your leadership philosophy in terms of leading people?
Yeah. I think my leadership philosophy today as I sit in front of you, right? Because as a leader, we continue to evolve and to develop, right? As we continue to learn and grow. I believe in creating a culture and what we've tried to do of leaders that there is accountability amongst each other, right? The opportunity to have challenging conversations and to lean in so that we can be effective and get to the bottom line of challenging situations and solving problems, but also coming from a place of being a servant leader, right? Because again, I sit in the seat I sit in because people have poured into me, and so that trickle down effect is really important, right? And even our student athletes pouring into, upperclassmen into younger, first year rookies on the team and, younger people in the community, that's all really important. And to know at the end of the day, that this truly is an extended family and sport is important, right? But the classroom has given us a life of an educated person to go out and change the world, right? And so sport we look at as a place of, a classroom without four walls. And so using those leadership skills and models through sport in a lens that, really changes lives, but it also makes it fun.
Yeah, exciting to do, right? Well, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us on the One Question Leadership podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. That was Michelle Morgan. She is the Senior Director of Athletics at John Carroll University. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.